Ironborn are an unusual bunch. After having almost no role in a Game of Thrones, they out of nowhere conquer the North in a Clash of Kings. We hear almost nothing from them in A Storm of Swords, and then are hit with 3 different points of view that aren't Theon in A Feast for Crows. And then somehow our Greyjoys are central to the Battle of Ice and the Battle of Fire, not to mention Oldtown. Are the Ironborn really just a bunch of troublemaking pirates, or is there something more to them? Who are the Ironborn exactly, and what do they really want? Well, the most revealing event for the Ironborn is the Kingsmoot. Let's start with Asha. She is the reasonable candidate. She puts forward the peace option. Let's sue for peace, get the Stony Shore and Sea Dragon Point, and the Ironborn will have more land than they could ever need. She seems to be supported by House Botley, House Harlaw, House Blacktide, House Merlin, along with some Sharps and the good brothers of Shatterstone. Now let's look at Asha's Alliance of the Reasonable a little more closely. First we have House Botley, who shares the island of Pike with the Greyjoys. The Botleys control the port of Lord's Port. The castle of Pike on Pike doesn't have any safe anchorage, so everything has to go through Lord's Port. When Theon visits the village of Lord's Port, it's a booming town. It has bounced right back from the Greyjoy rebellion and seems to be doing great through trade. Greyjoy lands, on the other hand, don't seem very fertile, and I imagine sheer cliffs aren't that great for fishing, so it seems the Botleys would be at odds with any leader that promoted war. Peace and closer ties with the Greenlanders has benefited House Botley, so it stands to reason that they would want more of that. And the Botleys' mindset seems to be more Greenlander as well. Before the Greyjoy rebellion, they used to have a sept. And Christopher Botley seems to value chastity as a virtue, like a knight. A dislike of the Botleys and their Greenlander ways may explain why Balon sent Christopher away after he was caught fooling around with Asha. Next we have House Harlaw. Harlaw is the richest and most populous isle in the Iron Isles, and its lord, Roderick the Reader, has embraced education. He quite openly rejects the old ways, and even keeps septons around to take care of his books. At least one Harlaw is a knight, which means he's probably converted to the Faith of the Seven. It should be noted that Asha and Theon are both half Harlaw, and Asha considers Harlaw her true home. Asha and Theon's mother resides on Harlaw and not Pike, so she may have had some marital troubles with Balon. And then there's House Blacktide. Baelor Blacktide was a hostage in Oldtown and converted to the Faith of the Seven. He's very open about his dislike for Balon, the old ways, and war. Unlike many others on the Iron Isles, he dresses quite well, so I imagine he's doing fine economically. And this is really the base of Asha's alliance, the Botleys, the Harlaws, and the Blacktides. They're all doing fine economically, are fine with the Faith of the Seven, and are looking for peace. Not to mention the fact that Christopher Botley was fostered at Blacktide, and he and Baelor Blacktide are the only off-islanders to visit Roderick the Reader before the Kingsmoot. Now we know less about the other houses, but they seem like-minded. House Merlin styles themselves as lords and wears furs and velvets. House Merlin also seems to have a somewhat hostile relationship with Aeron Greyjoy. And then there's House Sharp. We don't know much about House Sharp, but the Sharps were part of Theon's sack of Winterfell. This is interesting as the only other 2 houses that we know accompanied Theon are the Harlaws and the Botleys. This means Theon was accompanied by the Alliance of the Reasonable. If Balon didn't trust Theon, it means he probably didn't trust the Alliance of the Reasonable either. It also means that when Theon sacrificed Septon Shale to the drowned god to impress his men, he probably didn't impress anyone. The Alliance of the Reasonable is tolerant of the Faith of the Seven. Now the final supporters of Asha are some good brothers, likely from Shatterstone, but we really don't know anything about them. Now House Harlaw is the strongest of the Alliance of the Reasonable, and they have a couple of unruly bannermen. There's House Kenning and House Meyer. These 2 were once bitter foes and have been beaten down to vassals. Unsurprisingly, they don't follow the Harlaws. House Kenning ends up supporting Victarion, while House Meyer supports Euron. Now let's talk about Victarion. Victarion is the Old Way candidate. Those houses that are interested in the Drowned God and Reaving would support Victarion. Victarion is supported by the good brothers of Hammerhorn, House Spar, House Kenning, House Stonehouse, House Humble, House Volmark, House Tawny, House Weaver, as well as some Sharps and an opportunistic Harlaw. Now let's look at Victarion's Alliance of Reavers more closely. The story of the Ironborn in A Feast for Crows starts out with House Goodbrother of Hammerhorn and House Spar seeking out Aeron Greyjoy. Although the Goodbrothers and the Spars are religious enough to get baptized on their name day, they're not that religious. None of them are getting the full treatment from CPR-certified Aeron Greyjoy, so right off the bat, it's a little curious that they're seeking him out. What's also odd is that Spar and Good Brother insist that Aeron travel to Hammerhorn. Good Brother could have easily traveled to Aeron, and yet he had Aeron come to him. Is there something important at Hammerhorn? Once Aeron arrives at Hammerhorn, there's a conflict. There's a maester there, and Aeron hates maesters. A maester once failed to save Aeron's brother's life, and Aeron has hated them ever since. Aeron demands that the maester leave, but Good Brother insists that the maester stays. Now maybe Good Brother just really likes his maester, but it's a bit odd as Good Brother supports Victarion. His maester, on the other hand, unsurprisingly, supports Asha and the Alliance of the Reasonable. So Good Brother insists that Aeron travel to Hammerhorn to talk to a maester that Good Brother disagrees with. Why on earth would he do this? Well, let's puzzle this one out. Victarion has a very weak claim. Assuming Theon is dead, under Greenlander succession, Asha is queen. Under Iron Isle's succession, Euron is king. Victarion can only become king through a weird, subjective technicality that Euron isn't religious enough. And this really explains why Good Brother and Spar have sought out Aeron. They want Victarion to be king, but they know they have a very weak position. They need Aeron, an influential religious leader, to actively support Victarion in order for him to have a chance. After all, it's Good Brother that introduces the idea of Victarion being king, and not Aeron. Having Aeron come to Hammerhorn and talk to a maester seems to have been to rile Aeron up. So the Spars and the Good Brothers seem to have provoked Aeron into calling a Kingsmoot. Not that they expected a Kingsmoot, they likely just wanted Aeron to throw in with Victarion. But it's not just Aeron who was manipulated, Victarion was manipulated as well. Prior to the Kingsmoot, Victarion was holding Moat Cailin. Ralph Kenning and Red Ralph Stonehouse convinced Victarion to throw in for the Seastone chair.
Balon's sons are dead,
Red Ralph Stonehouse had argued.
and Asha is a woman. You are your brother's strong right arm. You must pick up the sword that he let fall.
When Victarion reminded them that Balon commanded him to hold the moat against the Northmen, Ralph Kenning said, "The wolves are broken, Lord. What good to win this swamp and lose the Isles?" Kenning and Stonehouse's comments are stupid. In fact, they're astoundingly stupid. They say Theon is dead and the North is broken, but Theon can only be dead if the North isn't broken. In addition to being illogical, the comments show a fundamental disregard for Balon's plans. Moat Cailin is not merely a swamp like Ralph Kenning says. It's the key to the whole North. The abandonment of Moat Cailin so fundamentally benefits House Lannister and House Bolton that I have to question the loyalty of House Kenning and House Stonehouse. As it turns out, there is another House Kenning, one in the Westerlands, that's loyal to House Lannister. Moat Cailin was left to Ralph Kenning, but he was poisoned by a Crannogmen's arrow, so we may never know his true loyalties. Red Ralph Stonehouse also acts a bit suspicious when he convinces all of the Ironborn that they should raid Oldtown and the Arbor. Why weren't any locations in the Westerlands named? Red Ralph eventually goes missing with a large number of Victarion's ships around the Basilisk Isles. Whether he had a run-in with the Corsair King is unknown. Regardless, the Good Brothers of Hammerhorn, the Spars, the Kennings, and the Stonehouses seem to have worked to have Victarion abandon Moat Cailin and throw in for the Seastone chair. Victarion is also supported by a House Humble. House Humble is descended from thralls, so it'd be interesting to know where they're originally from. Twins run in their family, so I wonder if they could be Lannisters, or Redwynes, or Cargyles, or Drinkwaters. The most significant thing about House Humble is that it was a Humble that betrayed Dagon Cod and surrendered Moat Cailin. House Volmark also supports Victarion, but we don't know very much about them except that they're descendant from Harren the Black. We don't know much about House Tawny or House Weaver, except for the fact that they like old reaving songs. But if Victarion's alliance is all about reaving in the old way, and Asha's alliance is all about peace and the new way, where does Euron fit in? Well, we'll talk about Euron and his Alliance of the Damned in Part 2.